While today's talk is about reflection on the Dhamma Path, we have to remind ourselves, in fact, constantly, what is the purpose of this Dhamma, or what we commonly call Buddhism, that the Buddha has shared with us. In the Vinaya Pitaka, more specifically, the Mahavagga, a book in the Vinaya Pitaka, the Buddha mentioned to the first 60 arhats, go monks on tour for the benefit of the common folk, the benefit, the happiness of the common folk, out of compassion for the world, the welfare, the benefit, the happiness of gods and human beings. So clearly, this Dhamma which the Buddha has taught is for our benefit, for our happiness, for our welfare. And why are the Sangha members, the students of the Buddha teaching it? It is out of compassion for us that they are sharing what the Buddha has taught. So we have to constantly bear this in mind. And again, ordinary beings in the world always have wants, have desires. I want this, I want that. And in the Ita Sutta, which you have heard in many Dhamma talks already, and here I repeat, the Buddha mentions that what is longed by the majority of the human beings on earth, in fact, all, not just human beings, but many beings, is that of long life. We want beauty, or in the case of guys, handsomeness. We want happiness, we want fame, and ultimately rebirth in heaven. Now, of these 5 things, house law, the Buddha mentioned, I do not teach that they are to be obtained through prayer, nor through wishing. If one could obtain them through prayer or through wishing, who would not obtain them? And clearly, we, from our experience, we have seen for ourselves, our relatives, our friends, and those around us, that many have been wishing, many have been praying, and trying various means to obtain this. And the Buddha continues, for the noble disciple, house lord, who wishes to have rebirth in heaven, to have long life, beauty, and so on, it is not proper that he should pray for rebirth in heaven, for long life, beauty, fame, and so on. Okay, to partake delight in this. So he should rather follow a way of life that is conducive to what he wants, to conducive to long life, to fame, to beauty, to ultimately rebirth in heaven. By following such a path, he will obtain these things that he is so much sought after. And therefore, reflection is an important tool that we have to consider whether what we desire and the means to achieve what we desire is proper or not, whether it would make sense or not, whether it would even give us a payback, that means give us what we want or not. So reflection starts from that very, very beginning. That means the search for this. And of course, this search always begins with inquiry versus what we desire, what we want. And when we do inquiry, we look for information here, there, and everywhere. And this reminds me that when we inquire, we hear people say this and say that. We hear video talks, we go to physical talks, we attend physical talks, we read books, articles, and so many things. Even hearing from our elders within the family or elders within the community. So many advices, so many ideas, but are they correct? And the sutta the Buddha delivered to the Kalamas comes to mind. We have so many ideas thrown at us, but which makes sense? Which should we throw away? So we have to be very careful as to receiving this advice. That means taking action from this advice given. We have to sort out, we have to investigate, we have to reflect and contemplate about it. Dhamma Sutta is an interesting sutta in which the Buddha wasn't talking about enlightenment, but it was delivered to King Pasenadi. And this is one of those suttas where the Buddha talked about dieting. Okay, many of us probably in need of dieting. So the sutta mentions, once when the Buddha was living in Savatthi, King Pasenadi of Kosala ate a whole bucket full of food and then approached the Buddha, engorged and panting, and sat down to one side. As you know, King Pasenadi is the king of the kingdom of Kosala and the capital of Savatthi. And the Buddha often resided in Jetavana Monastery and other monasteries within the Savatthi area. And the King Pasenadi would avail himself to listen to Buddha's Dhamma talk more than once a day, because it's just nearby his palace. So, and often he would eat a lot, and he came for this Dhamma talk. In this case, it was in the afternoon, just after lunch. The Buddha, discerning that King Pasenadi was engorged and panting, took the occasion to utter this verse. When a person is constantly mindful and knows when enough food has been taken, all their afflictions become more slender. They age more gradually, protecting their lives. So indeed, the Buddha has shown me compassion, in this case mentioned by King Pasenadi, shown me compassion in two different ways, for my welfare right here and now, and also for in the future. So clearly, this is the Buddha's take on how to protect the king's welfare. In this case, to ask him to don't eat so much, be moderate in your food, and so on. So this is something in which the Buddha mentioned, and is for King Pasenadi to reflect on constantly, to think about over and over. And this, if you read the sutta in full, which I hope you will know that the king didn't have any digital recorders to record what the Buddha said, or video cameras. So he employed a young man who was also present at the time when the Buddha said this, employed the young man to be his repeater. So every time the king were to go for a makan session, the young man's duty was to repeat the Buddha's advice to the king, sort of remind the king. And with that reminder, the king would reflect and be more mindful when he eats, that he will not eat too much. And the key thing is, when enough food has been taken, has been consumed, he should stop. Okay, that was how he lost weight, and his horse could carry him on his pleasure journeys, hunting, and so on. So it was for his benefit during that life. So this reflection in terms of our physical health is clearly demonstrated in this particular sutta. A very simple one, nothing to do with enlightenment, but it shows a function of a reflection. In the end, we are responsible for our own lives. And in this particular sutta, which later portion of this sharing from the Anguttara Nikaya Book of 5, I will be going into greater detail. But here I'd like to extract this particular paragraph, that the Buddha said that I am the owner of my deeds or my actions, heir to my actions. Actions are my womb, my relative, my refuge. I shall be the heir of whatever deeds I do, whether good or bad. So we have to constantly remind ourselves that we are responsible for all this. And all this reflection takes time and is always gradual. As the Buddha mentioned in this particular Uposatha Sutta, he mentions about the gradual nature in which from the beach we go into the deepest oceans, that the oceans have a gradual shelf, a gradual slope, a gradual inclination, leading to a sudden drop-off only after a long stretch. So in the same way, this Dhamma Vinaya, means doctrine and discipline, is how the Buddha described what he has been teaching all this time. This Dhamma and Vinaya has a gradual training, a gradual performance, a gradual progression with a penetration to Nibbana only after a long stretch. So this Uposatha Sutta is from the Udana. So everything is step by step. As we observe in our lives, everything we want to learn, we start from those of us who are lucky, we go to kindergarten, then we go to standard 1, standard 2, we progress in learning. Okay, and after school, we still have to learn step by step all the things we need to in order to gain life's experience. And all these step by step, what are we to do? All that sharing with us out of compassion for us, for our benefit, for our welfare. What is this? It's basically the path to happiness, the Noble Eightfold Path, comprising the right understanding, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, which all of you would have been, who have heard this mentioned over and over again. But again, I have to remind you that it is the Noble Eightfold Path. It is a path, as the picture shows. A path is not just something to look at and say, oh, what a beautiful path. Or all the gardening is so well done and so on. A path is to be walked on. You want to bring yourself from where you are to somewhere else, you have to walk along a path. And this path is noble. It is ennobling. It ennobles us. It makes us more and more noble. That means we know what to do. We do it properly and we achieve nobility. This nobility is the attainment of arahatship. That's the ultimate nobility, the seeing and experiencing of Nibbana. And what does it comprise? It's eightfold path. It is not the noble eight path, but eightfold, because all the factors, all the 8 factors here intertwine, inter-support each other. They are all needed. We might be pointing at one particular aspect, say right speech, but right understanding and right thought comes into play also. That's why it is eightfold. It comes all together and support, and intermingle to let us walk along this path towards nobility. That's why it is the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, in this particular sutta, the Punya Kriya Vatu Sutta from Iti Vuttaka, and in fact, this sutta has been repeated a few times elsewhere in the Sutta Pitaka and other collections. And the Buddha mentions, because there are these 3 grounds for making merit. What 3? Now, although Buddha mentions 3 grounds for making merit, it is action-oriented. When we do certain actions with wholesome mind, what happens? We are cultivating. We reflect on this, we cultivate, we put into action. Now, it is meritorious because it generates wholesome karmic energies. But at the same time, if we approach it from the point of view of training ourselves, we actually increase our kusala, that means the wholesomeness of our actions. And this kusala attitude, without regard of whether we make merit or not, actually uplifts us, makes us more and more noble, and let us move along the path towards Nibbana. And what is this? And the Buddha continues, one should train in deeds of merit that yield long-lasting happiness. And why is this long-lasting happiness? Long-lasting happiness is not a matter of just the balance of our life on earth now, but long-lasting happiness continues into the afterlife. Not just the next life, but many, many lives after, because it has benefit. And long-lasting happiness also talks about pointing towards Nibbana. Why? Nibbana is the ultimate happiness. Okay, so it is not just mundane happiness in the next moment of the balance of this life, not just in the next life and a few other lives after that, but ultimately towards Nibbana. And this is the basics which we have to cultivate, reflect on how to cultivate this. And we often hear the term Dana, Sila, Bhavana, which is the basic kindergarten of practicing along the Noble Eightfold Path. And what is Dana? Dana is giving, and Sila is virtue or morality, and Bhavana is mental development. So, and the sutta continues, by cultivating these 3 things, deeds yielding happiness, the wise person is reborn in bliss in an untroubled, happy world. So this is the mundane benefit, because as you practice this, you gain merit, and merit supports you, makes your life more and more pleasant instead of giving you more troubles. I will not go into great detail regarding all these dana, sila, and bhavana, but share with you certain important words of the Buddha. So in this particular sutta from also Iti Vuttaka, the Buddha mentions, if beings knew, as I know, the result of giving and sharing, they would not eat without having given, nor would they allow the stain of meanness to obsess them and take root in their minds. So clearly, the Buddha holds in high esteem the importance of cultivating dana. So in many, many other talks already, many speakers have shared regarding these important aspects. Now moving on, cultivation of morality or virtue, sila. And we often start with some basic 5 precepts. Now, most of us in the Buddhist world, the Buddhist community, would be familiar with the 5 precepts. And the key thing about the 5 precepts, this Pancha Sila, is that of abstention. The Buddha starts the training, our reflecting on this training with avoiding hurting ourselves. The 5 precepts actually protect us from gaining unwholesome karmic energies that make our future lives, future balance of this life, and the future next lives and so on, more and more unpleasant. So we have to stop hurting ourselves, in other words. Practice of the 5 precepts actually is an act of compassion towards other beings as well as towards ourselves. We have to be compassionate to be able to practice the 5 precepts. And earlier in the puja, we already recited the full recital for Panchasila, which comprises the abstention from killing, abstention from taking what is not given, abstention from sexual misconduct, abstention from false speech, and abstention from taking intoxicants. Now, while this Panchasila is about avoidance, is to have compassion towards others and compassion towards us, protecting ourselves, we need to take what I call positive action, not just abstention, but we have to do something positive to develop something. And what is this? Clearly, 5 ennoblers, the direct opposite of the 5 precepts. Ennoblers is made up of ennoble, that means to make us more noble. So the opposite of killing is to save lives. So how do you save lives? Well, some people might say, oh, I don't kill by becoming a vegetarian. These are some of the actions people take. Some people also take into account the aspect of, oh, perhaps I can use my body to help others. Why? By acquiring skills like first aid. Okay, if somebody is hurt, I'm able to render first aid while waiting for the professionals to come in. Of course, if you are a professional, like a nurse, like a doctor, then of course you can render immediate help. Okay, but if not, at least first aid will help. There are those that commit their bodily organs for donation, for use, when you no longer need these organs. So you commit your organs and you share your wish with your family so that they do not object to this. And when the time comes for this to be activated, then hopefully your organs are able to save other people's lives. Then you have the aspect of donating blood, donating platelets. So these are the many things you can do with regard to cultivating the opposite of killing, in this case, saving lives. So you can similarly cultivate the ennoblers through the balance of these 5 steps. So taking what is not given, well, that is to be generous, to be more giving, to practice dana and chaga, and so on, which I will not go into because many Dhamma talks shared already have covered in these aspects in detail. Another aspect about the 5 precepts and the 5 ennoblers, clearly from the Dhamma Path, the Buddha mentions, one who, while himself seeking happiness, oppresses with violence other beings who also desire happiness, will not attain happiness hereafter. And one who, while himself seeking happiness, does not oppress with violence other beings who also desire happiness, will find happiness hereafter. So clearly, in many parts of the 45 years of sharing, the Buddha walked all over northern India. He has repeatedly mentioned this aspect of not hurting other living beings and so on. In this case, from the Dhamma Path verse. Now, what about cultivating the mind? Bhavana. Well, this particular advice was given to the Kalamas, and most people view the Kalama Sutta as don't believe this, don't believe that, and you should evaluate this way and that way. But few bother to read the sutta in full. So when you read the sutta in full, interestingly, Kalama Sutta talks about development of the Brahma Viharas. That was cultivating metta, karuna, also mudita, and upeka. So in this case, this section of the Kalama Sutta, the Buddha mentions, thus devoid of greed, devoid of ill will, undeluded, alert, and resolution, keeps pervading the first direction, which is the east. the second direction, which is the south, the third direction, which is the west, the fourth direction, which is the north, with an awareness imbued with goodwill or metta. And similarly, he talked about not just developing the goodwill, thus he keeps pervading above, below, all around, everywhere, and in every respect, the all-encompassing cosmos with an awareness imbued with goodwill, abundant, expansive, immeasurable, free from hostility, free from ill will. And similarly, we should also cultivate this meditation with compassion or karuna, with appreciation or mudita, with equanimity, with upeka. So here, the Kalama Sutta also teaches the Brahma Viharas. Now, as we go into deeper and deeper or get involved into more important practice of what the Buddha taught, we had to take what I call lessons from this particular sutta, Amba Palitika Rahulo Vada Sutta from the Majjhima Nikaya, the Buddha's teaching of young Rahula, his son. And the Buddha mentions, what do you think, Rahula? What is a mirror for? For reflection, sir. So, in the same way, Rahula, bodily actions, verbal actions, mental actions are to be done with repeated reflection. So here is a sutta in which the Buddha taught his young son the importance of reflecting on his bodily actions, verbal actions, and mental actions. And not just one time or listening during this talk, but repeated reflection. So constant reflection is very important. And the Buddha continues, whenever you want to do a bodily action, you should reflect on it. This bodily action I want to do, would it lead to self-affliction? That means hurt yourself. To the affliction of others, would it hurt others? Or to birth? So does it hurt yourself? Does it hurt others? Or would it hurt both of you, the others and yourself? Now this portion is when you want to do, that means you have not done that action yet. So before you do, you should reflect whether it is hurtful to yourself, others, or both of you. Now, would it be an unskillful bodily action with painful consequences, painful results? If on reflection, you know that it will lead to self-affliction, to the affliction of others, or to both, it would be an unskillful bodily action with painful consequences, painful results. Then any bodily action of that sort is absolutely unfit for you to do. So clearly, in a way, this is very commonsensical, but some people needs to be reminded of this so-called common sense thing, which most of us will know, but sometimes you need to hear from the Buddha to lay it out very plainly. But if on reflection, you know that it would not cause affliction, it would be a skillful bodily action with pleasant consequences, pleasant results, then any bodily action of that sort is fit for you to do. So this particular Pali word which the Buddha used is talking about having reflected, having considered, having reviewed, having contemplated. So this is the range of meaning regarding this particular this term, reflect. So while you are doing the bodily action, you should reflect on it. This bodily action I'm doing, is it leading to self-affliction, to the affliction of others, or to both? Is it an unskillful bodily action with painful consequences, painful results? If on reflection, you know that it is leading to self-affliction, to the affliction of others, or to both, you should give it up. But if on reflection, you know that it is not, you may continue with it. So clearly, the earlier pages talked about before you do, you should reflect. And in this page, we are talking about while you are doing it. It means you constantly give another chance to reflect whether to recheck your intentions and the actions, whether it is hurtful to others, hurtful to you, or to both of you. And of course, if it's hurtful to anybody, you should give it up. But if it's not, then you may continue doing it. So having done a bodily action, you should reflect on it. This is after you have finished performing that action. So clearly, the earlier pages, before you do, while you're doing it, and in this page, having done it, reflecting on the past action. So this bodily action that I've done, did it cause hurt to myself? Did it hurt others? Did it hurt both of us? Was it unskillful bodily action with painful consequences, painful results? If on reflection, you know that it led to self-affliction, affliction to others, and both, it was clearly an unskillful bodily action with painful consequences, painful results. Then you should confess it, reveal it, let it open to the teacher or to a knowledgeable companion in the holy life. Having confessed it, you should exercise restraint in the future. Now, I have to give elaboration on the bottom portion in bold. The Buddha mentions, then you should confess it. Why? To confess it? Because at that time, Rahula was not a lay person. It was Venerable Rahula, okay, a young monk under the training, that means a novice monk. And under the Patimokkha monks and novices, when they commit they broke their precepts or they commit certain wrongs, perform certain unskillful actions, it is their requirement to confess their misdeeds or breaking of precepts to another person in the holy life. That means to another monk. So they are supposed to confess it, reveal it, and mention this to their teacher and to another person, another monk. So not to hide it. And after that, they make further aspiration to exercise restraint in the future, not to commit such actions again. So if on reflection, you know that it did not lead to affliction, it was a skillful bodily action with pleasant consequences, pleasant result, then you should stay mentally refreshed and joyful, training day and night in skillful mental qualities. So this is the way the Buddha advised the young Rahula to train. And notice, this is only talking about bodily action that we should reflect before you do, while you're doing it, and after you are finished. But this advice to Rahula also covers before you take verbal action, before you say something, while you're saying, and after you have said it. Not just verbal action, also mental actions. That means what kind of thoughts have come into your mind. Now, some people might wonder, how can I control my thoughts? Well, thoughts, as we become mindful of our thoughts have a way of just coming and coming and coming. Why? The quality and the content of our thoughts are dependent on our habits, our defilements, and our virtues. They just come. We have no control over our thoughts. So we have to acknowledge them. We have to reflect upon it, whether we want to get involved in this mental action or we want to just observe it neutrally. Okay, as just thoughts are just thoughts. We don't have to get involved in the stories given or the topics mentioned in these thoughts. So therefore, the Buddha says we should pay attention when we want to think about something. If we deliberately want to think about something, then we should reflect. Is this reflection, the results of this reflection, is it wholesome or unwholesome? And while we are thinking about it, and after having thought about it, okay? So there are different levels of mental action. One of thoughts that appear in our mind, and thoughts which we intentionally want to think about, we want to reflect about. So Rahula, all those Brahmans and contemplatives in the course of the past who purified their bodily actions, verbal actions, and mental actions, did it through repeated reflection on their bodily actions, verbal and mental actions in just this way. So clearly, reflection is a very important quality throughout our practice. Now, if you want to keep it simple, even reflecting on the elements given in the 5 precepts is already very very beneficial to us. And when we are reflecting on the 5 precepts, each of the 5 precepts, using this method, we will avoid hurting ourselves and hurting others. And of course, when you do that, you automatically will also enlist the 5 ennoblers. We will entertain all those bodily actions, those verbal actions and mental actions mentioned in the 5 ennoblers. Okay, so that is a clear way. Of course, there are other aspects which you can train ourselves, but for the rest of us, most of us beginners, we will start with those basic reflections, 5 precepts and 5 ennoblers. So all those Brahmans and contemplators in the course of the future who will purify their bodily actions, verbal actions, and mental actions will do it to repeated reflection of their body, verbal, and mental actions. And those Brahmans and contemplators in the present who purify their body, verbal, and mental actions do it through repeated reflection. Okay, so clearly, whether it's in the past, the future, or the present, they will use this method of constant and repeated checking, reflection, in this case, used to check the quality of hurtfulness to oneself, hurtfulness to others, or hopefulness to both parties. And you decide whether to do it or not to do. So thus, Rahula, you should train yourself. I will purify my bodily actions through repeated reflection. I will purify my verbal actions through repeated reflection. I will purify my mental actions through repeated reflection. That's how you should train yourself. So that was what the Blessed One said, and gratified Venerable Rahula, delighted in the Blessed One's words. And Venerable Rahula, if you read the life story of Venerable Rahula, he was very conscientious and very encouraged by the advice given by his teachers, including his father, the Buddha. And he would conscientiously practice. And soon he became one of the Arahats. Another aspect of reflection which the Buddha encouraged us to do is that of the 3 characteristics of existence, that of anicca, of dukkha, and anatta. Anicca being impermanence, dukkha meaning unsatisfactoriness, or some people prefer the word suffering, and anatta being not self, not non-self, but not self. This picture already clearly shows the impermanent and unsatisfactoriness of existence, that we are born, we grow up, we live a life, and we pass away. And this is, for most people on the street, this is not what we want. We want to grow up and stay young, stay 21 or 18, whichever you prefer, for the rest of your life, permanently 18 years old, physically, mentally, and so on, and never die. But this is not reality. This is what you wish, which is impossible to attain. Because from our observations, our grandparents pass away, our parents pass away, and we ourselves are getting older. Okay, our children are growing up. That means they are getting older too. Okay, so this is the characteristics of existence. And in this aspect, the Buddha gave us another set of reflections that we should constantly remind ourselves. These are what I'm sharing with you are deeper and deeper aspects or topics for reflection to aid us along the Noble Eightfold Path towards enlightenment. And this particular sutta, which I already shared one section of it earlier on, the Buddha mentions there are these 5 facts that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or dead. Which 5? I am subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging. This is the first fact that one should reflect on often. I am subject to illness, have not gone beyond illness. I am subject to death and have not gone beyond death. I will grow different or separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. Why? Because we change. I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, and I have my actions as my arbitrator. Whatever I do for good or for evil, to that, I will fall heir. This is what I shared earlier already. So, elaborating. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I am subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging? There are beings who are intoxicated with youth, intoxication with youth. Now, this is interesting. Very often, even in the 21st century, we look at youth, whether Buddhist youth or non-Buddhist youth, but youth in general. Especially in this pandemic, there are a lot of youth who say that, oh, we will not catch COVID because we are young, our immune systems are strong. But sadly, although majority of the youths, if they do catch COVID also, they will recover. But they have been on record that many youths have succumbed to this pandemic. That means they have caught COVID and their condition got more complicated and they passed away through this disease. So being young doesn't mean you are not subject to change. And in this case, to intoxication with youth. And youth will give rise to old age. And because of that, their bodies are not perfect also. They will also pass away. Now, because of that intoxication with youth, they conduct themselves in a bad way in body, in speech, and in mind. This reminds me of those youth who are not afraid of growing old and think that they are beyond, in later pages, beyond ill health, beyond death, that spawns the idea of the mat rempit and all those things which they endanger their lives. So, but when they often reflect on this fact, that youth intoxication with youth would either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. So this constant reflection on aging, even though you're young, is not resigning to the fact that you will grow old and lament and be very sad about it. But we do not want to be intoxicated. We do not want to be deluded by our youthfulness, but make use of this youth, our young age, to do something profitable for others as well as for ourselves. So we are not deluded by this youthfulness in our age. And of course, aging is also another aspect in which the cosmetic industry strive on. Just because we can apply this cream, we take this particular diet and so on, we look young. But as far as our IC is concerned, the birth date is there and the number keeps growing year after year. So we can be 100, but will we look 16 years old? That's another issue. Okay, we can take all that. But with age comes death, ultimately. Now, the Buddha continues. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I am subject to illness, have not gone beyond illness? And there are those who are intoxicated with health. Now, when they are young, they assume that they are healthy. Most people assume that they are healthy. But of course, there are also sickly young people. But for those who are healthy, they assume that they are young, they will be healthy, and they will not be subject to illness. Most of us would have had some aspect of illness affect us in our course of life, in the many years in our lives. Some mild illness, some very serious illness. But nevertheless, we are subject to illness, and we should not be complacent and be intoxicated with health, especially with respect to age. When we are young, we assume we are healthy, and that is wrong. So while we are not intoxicated with health, we should also take care of our health. Why? Because if you're ill, there are things we cannot do, including walking the Noble Eightfold Path. So we have to take care of our health, but not be intoxicated with it. We have to be aware that we may grow ill, we may catch certain illness, and so on. But we have to take care of ourselves. So if certain illness are spread through aerosols, so we have to take precautions by wearing a mask. If we are, and sometimes we have to wear thick clothing to keep the cold out so that we can keep warm, so that we don't catch a cold and so on. So there are certain things we can do. We are not intoxicated with the health, but we are prudent. We are aware that we may catch a cold, we may get ill. So we have to take care of our diet, our exercise, and other precautions, commonsensical precautions, so that we can maintain our health for the purpose of not just what they call simply doing actions based on body, speech, or mind, but take care of health so that we can walk the Noble Eightfold Path to gain permanent, everlasting happiness. So, and the Buddha continues in this second paragraph. Because of that intoxication with health, they conduct themselves in a bad way in terms of the body, speech, and mind. So this is the wrong attitude, the wrong foundation. But we have to take the appropriate mental attitude with regard to our health. So a healthy person with this constant reflection, they will abandon this delusion of eternal health, and we hopefully we abandon this notion, and this notion grows weaker and so on. But make use and maintain our health so that we can further our journey along the Noble Eightfold Path and to help others. So here the Buddha talks about the reflection on I am subject to death, have not gone beyond death. There are beings who are intoxicated with a living person's intoxication with life. Now, all these topics of youth, of illness, and death are interrelated. We assume that when you're young, you will not get old and you will not die. But as we grow older, okay, most people assume as we grow older, we are approaching death's door. But that is not true for the young people also. Children also die. Young people, 18 years old, 20 years old, 30 years old, also die. At whatever age, we also get ill, and so on. So all these reflections are helping us to get rid of our delusion with, in this case, youth, of our inability to get ill, and with death also. So these are some of the constant reflection we have to remind ourselves. And how do you remind yourself? These kind of photographs which we see and very often in the social media and so on, remind us that that we should not be deluded or intoxicated with these aspects of youth, illness, and life. And with this constant reflection, this intoxication, this delusion grows weaker, and hopefully we abandon it. And since death is approaching us, time is not on our side. And because of that, we have to do what needs to be done to secure our next few days, our future lives, and so on. So we have to do what is right. Another reflection the Buddha mentioned is, I will grow different and separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. There are beings who feel desire and passion for the things they find dear and appealing. So because of that passion, they conduct themselves in a bad way in body, speech, and mind. So this reflection is that in whatever relationship, whether as a friend, as a relative, even as a spouse, there were times that we will grow different because our experiences in life are different. We encounter husband, wife, or best friends do not go all over town together all the time. They go about their own ways to encounter different groups of friends and all that. And our experiences are different. We will learn new experiences. And because of that experience, it changes us. And there may be times where we grow apart and separate. And therefore, we have to be aware that this is a possibility. Okay, not to be suddenly shocked and be overly, sad about this. So when we often reflect on this fact, the desire for things that they find dear and appealing will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. So we should not let this growing apart affect us too much. Okay, we should be aware that this is normal. This is part of life. And ultimately, the Buddha mentioned, I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, and have my actions as my arbitrator. Whatever I do, for the good or for evil, to that I will fall heir. There are beings who conduct themselves in a bad way, in body, speech, or mind. And when they reflect often, this will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. Now, this particular last one is very important because we are not talking about uh, mere actions, but actions have owners. So our actions, we own the actions. And what is this heir? H-E-I-R. Interestingly pronounced as heir. Why? Heir means we inherit these actions. So a lot of people think that, oh, I have all these riches, I have this Rolls Royce in a car, in my garage, I have all these bonds and money that in my bank or in my shares and so on in my property, that when I pass away, it can follow me into the next world. And even some of our relatives, some old Chinese customs, we can burn mobile phones, we can burn houses, we can even burn the maids, and hopefully to transfer all this wealth to the next world. But in the end, the Buddha says it is not all these that it can be that will follow you into the next world. It is your actions, because you own your actions. You inherit your actions into the next life. And not just that, your actions determine what you are born as. That means whether as a human being, whether as an animal, whether you go towards the hell worlds, or you are born as a deva, or born in the Brahma worlds. So we are able to determine our future destiny. And we will become related through our actions. Related in terms of brother and sisters, father and mother. Related in terms of our friends, who are our friends. And very often in some of those past life recalls, there have been recollections or documented evidences that people tend to move around together. Although in this life, they may be father and mother, but in the previous life, they were brothers and sisters, or they could be good friends, but they have been reborn again and again, associated with each other, related to each other, either blood relatives or just by relationship, that means as their friends. So all because of their affinity to each other and also their actions that they determine their future in the sense. So in the end, the Buddha summarizes, whatever I do, for good or for evil, to that I will fall heir. So you inherit all these actions. And the Buddha encourages one that I am not the only one subject to aging, okay, who is not gone beyond aging, to the extent that there are beings past and future passing away and re-arising. All beings are subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging. So we're not talking about reflecting about ourselves, but we look around us. Other people also are subject to this particular. They don't have youth, so they are subject to aging. Now, when he or she reflects this often, the factors of the path take birth. The factors of the path, why? Because you see the urgency, you see the futility on being deluded and intoxicated by youth, of health, and so on. And because of that, getting rid of that delusion, you take action. So factors of the path means you want to take action. Your energy, your viriya, your intention becomes stronger and stronger, that you want to end this continued birth in samsara, cycle of birth and death in samsara. And that becomes a factor of the path. Take birth means it comes up and it propels you, it gives you motivation to practice. So continuing, he or she sticks with that path, develops it, cultivates it. As he or she sticks to that path, develops it and cultivates it, the fetters are abandoned, the obsessions destroyed. So this is laying the foundation that for you to gain enlightenment, to gain arahatship. So that means the opposite of this, being infatuated with youth, being infatuated with health and so on, is hindrance to the factors for enlightenment. And therefore, when you reflect on this often, you see this in reality around you, not just yourself, what happens? It kicks you in the butt and tells you, hey, this is urgent, this is no play, and you don't want to be deluded by all these mainstream media and so on, and self-delusion. And because of that, you put in effort to walk the Noble Eightfold Path. And when you cultivate step by step, okay, everything is gradual training. Step by step, the fetters or the defilements are abandoned, obsessions destroyed, and you will definitely gain arahatship. So further, a disciple of the Noble Ones consider this: I'm not the only one subject to illness. I'm not the only one subject to death. I'm not the only one who will grow different. I'm not the only one who is the owner of my actions, heir of my actions, and so on. So clearly, these are things which we can do something about in our cultivation, leading on towards Nibbana. This particular sutta, Tutiya Mahanama Sutta from the Anguttara Nikaya Book of 11, the Buddha shares with Mahanama, the Sakyan, that one should, who has aroused, that means who has cultivated and encouraged to rise up the practice of faith for conviction or confidence, to encourage persistence and not be lazy in the practice, to encourage cultivation of mindfulness, to establish mindfulness, to be centered on concentration, and to cultivate wisdom in discerning. It means to see things as they really are. Okay. And all these benefits of recollecting, of reflection, the Buddha mentions this as things we should be recollecting or reflecting upon. The qualities of the Buddha, the qualities of the Dhamma, the qualities of the Sangha. Okay, all these aid into encouraging us, inspiring us to further our practice. Not just that, Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, but recollecting or reflecting our own virtues. All of us have virtues. Why is that? Because without virtues, you will have no opportunity to come across the Dhamma taught by the Buddha. And not only that, you have the opportunity to attend this Dhamma sharing also. So you definitely have some virtues. Of course, we are not angels. We are not 100% virtuous. We have some non-virtues also. But you have enough virtues to allow you the opportunity to come across the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, as well as to attend Dhamma sharings also. And we should recollect on our own generosity that we have performed in the past. We also should recollect or reflect on the Devas. How did they become Devas? What actions do they do? So that means looking at other beings who have done so. And because of their actions, their earlier actions, they inherit those actions and they become born as Devas. So this is examples of how recollecting or reflecting benefits us. It inspires us. It encourages us. It gives us more energy to pursue the practice along the Noble Eightfold Path. Now, all this recollecting or reflecting, okay? Now, when doing this, the mind of the person recollecting or reflecting is not overcome with passion, with hatred, and with delusion. His mind is straight. And when his mind is headed straight, the disciple of the Noble One gains a sense of the goal. That means he's aware of what he is intending to gain, a sense of where is the goal leading to, what direction. The person gains a sense of the Dhamma, gains joy connected with the Dhamma. And in one who is joyful, rapture arises in the person. And when the person who has rapture in the body grows calm. And in one whose body is calm, experiences cease. That means, and in one case, the mind becomes concentrated. So notice all this reflection helps the person to put away all these defiling passions, hatred, and delusion, and encourages the factors of the path. Step by step, the person calms down, rapture arises, the body grows calm, he feels happy, the mind becomes concentrated. And because of that, you are in deep meditation. And these are the tools which you need to use or to develop so that you can go into advanced practice along the Noble Eightfold Path. And the Buddha concludes that, Mahanama, you should develop this recollection or this reflection while you're walking, while you're standing, while you're sitting, while you're lying down, while you're busy at work, while you're resting at home, crowded with children. So with all that noise in the household also, we should be constantly reflecting on all this. So this is our homework, mentioned in by the Buddha, in this case, advice given to Mahanama, the Sakyan. In another sutta of the same name, Tutiya Mahanama Sutta, but found in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Buddha mentions that we will be able to develop experiential confidence. Why? Well, because we have been practicing the reflection and recollecting the qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And because of that, they also have ethical conduct. When those who have ethical conduct, they are loved. So we can see those around us who are well, to have good virtues, who have good moral standing, that everybody around them love them. And we can see this evident around us. And by the noble ones, leading to immersion, that means to deep concentration. So those of us who cultivate this, we will also be loved. And it helps us to go into deep samadhi, which is right concentration, which is a factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, which helps us to gain insights and ultimately enlightenment. So for those of us who are wondering, oh, so much to do, okay, in this particular sharing also, you see, wow, a lot of homework to do. We're not talking about Satipatthana already, we're just talking about basic 5 precepts and the 5 ennoblers, and what can we do with the 5 precepts and the 5 ennoblers. So if you're wondering, hey, can I finish this in this life? My life is also so short. But the Buddha in this particular sutta, the background of this sutta is that Mahanama, in this case, the Sakyan, mentioned to the Buddha that he already, sometimes he gets ill, he also getting old, and he may be subject to accidents. In the Kapilavatthu, a lot of traffic jams, they could be runaway bulls and bullock carts, may run him over. Sounds familiar in our modern day, it can be run over by cars. In those days, it's run over by bullock carts. You can actually die in the middle. So if he has not become an arahat, how? So the Buddha gave this particular sutta and say that as long as you have been constantly reflecting and recollecting the qualities of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, you have been cultivating your ethical conduct, your sila, you have been developing concentration, and so on. Okay, and the Buddha at the bottom gives this analogy. Suppose there was a tree that slants, slopes, and inclines to the east. If it was cut off at the root, where would it fall? Sir, it would fall in the direction that it slants, slopes, and inclines. So in the same way, the noble disciple who has 4 things, slants, slopes, and inclines towards extinguishment, that means towards nibbana, the person would be slanting in that direction. So as long as we have established a very strong foundation in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, in our sila, into our meditation, our bhavana, in this case, samadhi, okay, even if we have not attained arahatship in this life, we have cultivated the slanting towards nibbana. And if for some reason we will fall ill and die, we get involved in an accident and die, we will have already laid the foundation for our future lives. That in our next life, the next life will be supportive of us. We will be slanting in the Dhamma direction. And therefore, we can continue our practice even in the next life because we have laid the foundation. So the question now is, are we going to lay the foundation towards happiness, eternal happiness, which is Nibbana or not? And so regardless of whether we become arahats or even sotapan in this life, as long as we have strong foundation, even our life gets cut off in this life, we have already laid the necessary foundation for us to continue cultivating in the next life. There's no need to worry, as the Buddha mentioned to this Mahanama the Sakyan. So in the end, all the practice, all the teachings of the Buddha can be summarized in this Dhammapada verse 183. Sabba papasa akarana kusalasa upasampada, satita parayodapana, etang buddhana sasana. That we should avoid evil. That is the practice of at least the 5 precepts. To do good, so to cultivate the 5 ennoblers, at least that much. And to purify our minds. So having cultivated sila, which is avoid evil and do good, we purify our mind. And the first step is to attain mindfulness and concentration. Okay, this is the teaching of the Buddhas. So in summary, this, if you have forgotten all that I mentioned in the beginning of this talk, you must at least come away with this Dhamma Path verse. It not only summarizes the Buddha's teaching, but it gives us the syllabus as to what we need to do, okay, after this Dhamma talk, that we should avoid evil, to do good, and purify our minds. So with that, thank you. Sabbe sukhi huntu. Sat Dhamma jirang titatu. May the good doctrine long endure.